Welcome to this episode of Southbound Fishing. Today I'm going to be talking about tarpon. One of my favorite species, actually might be my favorite species to catch. The great thing about them, they're freshwater and saltwater. They'll live in freshwater, they'll live in the saltwater, they'll live, miles offshore in some cases, and they'll live in the same pond that you'll catch a bass in. So that's what I like about them. Their nickname is the Silver King because they can get to huge sizes. They jump like no fish I've ever experienced jumps like a tarpon, and they're a ton of fun to catch. They're really hard to catch. They're finicky. They're not like a normal fish. They act differently. So I'm going to be talking about some of the stuff I use to catch them, some of the stuff that I've had luck with, and some of the rigs I use for the big boys, where I catch them, what rod I use, all that kind of stuff. So we're going to get started here. I've uploaded a lot of videos, or a few videos on my YouTube channel of small tarpon about that big, and they live in freshwater. They live in a freshwater pond that's connected to a marsh system, which is how they get in. Floodwaters come in, they attract the fish follow the bait gets in, the fish follow the bait into the pond, and the floodwaters retreat, and they're in there. And now there's also other ways to get it in, straight tidal ponds that connect to marshes and saltwater creeks and rivers through culverts and things. They get in there, but that's the main pond that I'm fishing in. As you can see, it is not, the fish can't leave. They're trapped in there, which is cool. So we'll talk about the small ones first, then we'll get into the big boys off the beaches and things like that. Small ones, my favorite bait, to be honest with you right now, it's the Rip and Slash. It's an unfair lure. It's made by Unfair Lures, and Treasure Coast Tackle is the main person where I get them from. They carry them on the internet, and but these guys are based in Sebastian, Florida. They make an awesome bait. They make a ton of other stuff, but this is my favorite bait. It's the Rip and Slash. It's a sinking twitch bait. It sinks. It darts like a czar spook. It shimmies on the fall. It's got a little bit of flash in there. This is live willow white, one of my favorite colors. It's got a strong swivel on the front. It's just a twitch bait, I like it a lot more than mirrodines. I used to fish mirrodines almost exclusively, but I figured out these guys, and these guys slay fish. I love them. So, but a mirrodine will work the same. My second favorite twitch bait is the Impact Lures twitch bait. There's something about the Unfair Lures, but there's something about this guy too. I've caught tarpon on this bait as well. Twitch baits in general, there's a few of them I have right here. This is a mirrodine, made by Mirror. These work well. I love them to death. It's just a matter of personal preference. Let's see, you got a few other baits here. Here's a bomber twitch bait. So there's a bunch of different types of them that you can use out there. I personally like Impact Lures, Mirrodine, and the Unfairs. So those guys right there work the best I found for tarpon, period. Small ones in freshwater and small ones in saltwater, backcountry stuff. I love twitch baits. You can catch them on soft plastics, which I'll talk about in a minute. You can catch them on top waters, but the twitch bait is king, to me, at least. There's a few other baits that I like to throw. Just a second, let me get them out of here. Small Rapala, suspending, looks like a small glass minnow. Smaller the better for these small tarpon. If you can go in there and throw what a fish that size would normally look to eat. A subwalk. This thing's a little bit beat up by a gator, but I mean, I don't get bit on these things in there. I'm sure you catch tarpon on them, but it doesn't happen as often as it does with smaller baits. Elephants eat peanuts. That's one thing I try to describe to people who are new to tarpon fishing. That bait will slay tarpon, from half a pound up to 30-40 pounds, I bet. It's their bait fish. That's what a small mullet looks like, a small glass minnow. Just works. That's another small bait I like. One or two others. I've had fish boil. I'm just talking about hard baits here, guys. I've had a few fish. Second here. Come up and eat this small popper by Strike King. It's not one of my favorite baits to throw just because it's a top water. But it happens. You can catch tarpon on a lot of things, but those are my favorites. The sinking stuff, the small stuff, with trebles. I'll get into soft plastics right now. I love them. I love them to death. My baits that I I make a living off of, and it's hard to get them on these guys. It seriously is. This is a jerk minnow. I can get fish to boil on these, but they won't hook up. I've tried it on. It's not just my baits. I've tried it on these big baits. They don't hook up on that thing. They don't hook up on. It's just funny. It's just funny how it works. They don't. Tarpon are strange. I wish you could see them eat. They eat at a weird angle. They're just different than other fish. And with a single hook in there, it's hard to get them. I've tried running a trailer on it, a treble trailer. It gets in the way, and I'm not a big fan. But you can catch bigger ones on soft plastics. I'm sure you can catch small ones too, but you got to put a lot more time into it. I average, from every strike that I get on a twitch bait, I probably land, or at least hook up to, 4/5 of them. Now, out of those landed, it's probably 1/5, because the way tarpon fight, they lose a ton of baits doing it, and you jump them all the time. But that's 6 hooks on a bait that's, what, 3 inches long at the max? You know, your hookup ratio is going to explode with this compared to these baits. Going after bigger tarpon, if you got tarpon 10 to 50 pounds, you're going to want a plastic, because bigger fish it's more violent with a bigger fish. With a smaller fish, small jumps, and they can throw the bait. Trust me, they can throw the bait easy, but they can't throw it and the big ones, what I'm trying to say here is the big ones, they'll throw a bait and no problem, and you probably want a single hook in the big fish. That's why I'd feel more comfortable with one stout hook and a 30-pound plus tarpon than a bunch of treble hooks. So, plastics work. They're not my favorite again. I wish they were, because I make them, but I get more strikes on plastics, but I don't get nearly as much hookups. So that's the small guys. Small tarpon, freshwater, backcountry saltwater, that kind of stuff. Bigger tarpon, I'll go to the 30-plus pound range. They can live in freshwater too. It's a little bit more hard to catch, a lot more hard to catch, but it's not as hugely common around here. I live it's down in South Georgia. It's common to see them, but it's hard to catch them. In South Florida, they catch a lot of big tarpon out of freshwater, and that, for me, is a big mirrodine. You can't beat it. I love them. And that's just a bigger twitch bait. That's a big piece of bait, though. I'd be surprised if a small tarpon hit that. I mean, that's a big bait. Also, mirrodine twitch bait. A few other baits I got here for some bigger fish. 5-inch Loxahatchee Walker by Impact Lures, mullet color. And then this big black popper, which I'm a big fan of. I've had a ferocious strike down in South Florida on this thing. We're going to talk about on the beaches next. Alright guys, for the beach part of tarpon, which is mainly where the big guys hang out that I fish for personally, we're going to talk about some rigs. Mainly it's almost all live or dead cut bait. I prefer live, but there's a few guys down here that can get tarpon on the fly. Scott Owens is one of them. He's done it a few times, I think. And I've seen them chase a bait that's skipping on the top so well that I feel like I can get him on a swim bait. So that's going to be my goal for this year, is get a big tarpon over 80 pounds out of the kayak, off the beach, on a swim bait. I know it's a big goal, but we're going to see what we can do. So the rig that I almost never use, but a lot of guys use, is a standard bottom rig. This is, I believe, 6-ounce egg, 200-pound swivel, crimped, 125-pound mono, down to a big J hook. I don't know the exact odd. I bought this rig pre-made, but a fairly big J hook or circle. And this is for, normally you chum them, and you put a piece of dead pogey down, dead bluefish, just some sort of a dead bait down there, and hope that a shark or a big redfish doesn't grab it before a tarpon can, which is a hard feat with bottom fishing with dead bait, which is why I like to use the next tactic. And it's boring. These are my rigs that I use off the beach. I fish a 8,000 size reel, a stout 6-foot rod, and this is what I run. It's 100-pound mono, 8/0 Gamakatsu octopus circle. That's 5 feet. To a small but strong 150-pound test swivel. Loop knots on both ends. I seal the loop knots with a flame, and I press it down so it won't slip. And on that 8/0 circle, I fish 8 on the small end. Normally I'm fishing a 12 to 14 inch mullet, which is a big mullet. It's a big bait fish. They're plentiful around here. They stay alive for a long time, also known as hog leg to a lot of you saltwater guys. And that's what I throw on this. Now, with the tarpon are off our beach for, they're looking for pogies. There's huge pogie pods out there that are acres with thousands of fish in them. And a lot of guys use pogies. But one thing I don't like about pogies is, first of all, they'll die in 10 seconds out of a live well sometimes. I mean, if it's hot and you put them on a dry piece of equipment, they'll die in 10 seconds. They'll die on the hook in a minute or less, which is why I don't like them. A mullet, I can have a mullet swimming around for probably a good 4 hours on one hook through the nose. No bleeding, nothing like that. And you can't beat that. They're easier for me to acquire, and another thing I like, it's a bigger profile. A bait that big compared to a pogie that big, first of all, there might be 10,000 pogies in the half-mile around my kayak at the time, pogies that are that big, but there's only a few big mullet, if any big mullet. Those big mullet are going to get keyed in by the predators the fastest. It's going to be on the outside of the school. It's going to have a different swim signature, a different vibration, different everything, which is why I think it gets bit. And another fun thing about the mullet is it's big. It's a faster bait. It'll run up to the top. It'll give those tarpon the chase that they look for. That's another thing. Tarpon love to chase baits. They'll chase your twitch bait. They'll chase your fluke, your top water if you're throwing that, and they'll chase this big mullet around. I've seen them run the mullet around the boat 3 times before they eventually smash it and eat it. I like to use braided line when I'm fishing for these big tarpon. I'm normally running 50 to 80 pound braided line on a big spinning reel, an 8,000 size spinning reel, so I can tighten up that drag and have enough line to really handle that fish. I mean, if you hook a 150 pound tarpon from a kayak, you're going for a ride. It's a stated fact that that's going to happen. You're going to go for a little bit of a joyride with that fish because he's so big and he'll pull that yak with no resistance. Some of the guides around here, they use like TLD 25s, big reels, big huge rods. I don't really see the need for that. I mean, since I'm in a kayak, there's less resistance. I'm not anchored up. They're not going to run for 800 yards without me stopping it. I mean, I'm gonna go that 800 yards too, so I don't really need all that line. It's a different ball game, tarpon fishing from a kayak. If you're not an experienced paddler and an experienced fisherman, and I would not recommend it. You can get hurt. You can get seriously hurt, and it can turn bad on you pretty quickly. I always have something that I can cut off real quick. It's just safety stuff. I mean, you're dealing with a fish that's about the size of you and has probably more power than you in that one tail muscle, and it could flip you quickly if you're in a smaller kayak. So that's basically the basics of tarpon fishing. I'm sure you'll see more of them. They're my favorite species by far. They're freshwater and saltwater, and they're pretty abundant around here. So thanks for watching, guys. I hope you got a good insight to one of my favorite fish, and I hope you see it a little bit more often on the channel. Thanks for watching.